Hello, hello. How are you? Wonderful to be with you today. Thank you, Adrian, for introducing me. And thank you, Momentum, for giving us this incredible boost. I think it's really done incredible things for us, and it's wonderful to be here with you. And really a big, big welcome to all of you to joining me today as we go through this incredible story. A story that is not so easy. We're all in a very strange place. And yet we're going on a virtual tour of the land of Israel. So please come join me as we go to see a few hidden gems in the land of Israel. I want to begin as we go through the area of the land to try to understand as we begin in the north of Israel. We're going to the Hula Valley, just above my head, where you can see the Mount Hermon in the ski. We're going to the Hula Valley. That will be our first stop. From there, we're going to be traveling to the west. As we go towards Haifa, you can see on the map, just by the Mediterranean Sea, and we'll be near where the umbrella is, at a place called Hoff Door, the Door Beach. And our third and final stop of today will take us to Gush Etzion, just south of Jerusalem. Now, when we go on all these different elements, there are a few things that why I've chosen these three different places. The reason, or the common thread that goes through them all, is that the stories that we learn in these places are stories that connect us between the Torah and the land of Israel. And hopefully, some of them are slightly unusual. So our first stop is the Hula Valley. As you come towards the Hula Valley, look at that view. To your left, to the west, we are surrounded by mountains. Behind me, to the north of us, you can see the Hermon with its snow-peaked caps. And to the east, the Golan Heights with its amazing water hikes and fantastic ancient synagogues and other places to see. But as we look at the Hula Valley, you look around and you see acres of farmland. As you see the acres of farmland, you see all the things that are grown by the kibbutzim in the area, whether it is vegetation, whether it is plants, whether it is trees, fruit trees. And yet in the Hula Valley, what you also notice is the lake. That lake is actually a swamp, and the Hula Valley used to be a swamp. They've actually re-swamped some of what is there. And the swamp becomes a very important place because when you look around you, there is something very special that's happening at that swamp. The sky is enormous in this area. It is deep blue, punctuated with thousands of small black dots. And if you look carefully, if you take a closer look, those dots are not dots. Those are birds. Hundreds of thousands of birds that are migrating from Asia and Europe down to Africa, or at this time of year, from Africa back to Asia and to Europe. And they all come through this area. All these birds keep on flying from their places to their destinations, and they all come through here. Why do they choose the Hula Valley to come through? Because the Hula Valley is the only land crossing that they can go through. To the east is a desert. There is nothing for them to eat or drink in that area. To the west is the sea. And they aren't able then to come at night, to roost at night, and to just rest their weary wings for an evening. And so it is here where they come, and therefore, when you come next to the land of Israel, when you come on your trip to Israel, come to the Hula Valley. Come to see, especially at this time of year, the incredible amount of birds that are coming through and the sheer wonder of nature of 500 million birds coming through our skies. But before we move on to our next stop, you will ask me, well, what's the hidden story that is taking place here in the Hula Valley? Well, the hidden story is this. There's a passage in the Torah, a passage that we find in the book of Numbers, in the book of Bamidbar, which tells us of the children of Israel trudging through the desert. They're not going through the Hula Valley, they're going through the desert. And as they go through the desert, they are exhausted. They're hungry. They're complaining, as we all do when we're exhausted and hungry. And they are begging God, enough with the manna, we want meat. And he says, you know what? I will bring you meat. But then the story takes a very strange turn, because as the children of Israel find this meat, they all get sick. And I know what you're thinking. What does this have to do with our virtual tour of Israel and the migrating birds? Well, what you know is this. When God provides the meat, it actually was the meat of hundreds of thousands of migrating quails These birds, in contrast to the Hula Valley birds, travel through the sea or across the sea from Europe down to Africa. And perhaps the miracle of the story is that the children of Israel complain right at the migration season. And so what happens is that these thousands of birds traversing the sea, not being able to stop, wending their way as they flap their wings and go on for days and days and days. They are absolutely exhausted when they come and flop on the shores of Africa. And as they flop on the shores of Africa, the children of Israel eat them. But they get sick because they're poisonous, these birds. Because the birds with so much lactic acid having built up in them after so much work that they had to go through to fly are not quite edible. In fact, today, if you come to the shores of Egypt at the times of the migration, you will see these nets being placed on the beaches so that as the quail come exhausted, they flop down and they get caught in these nets. But all those who want to eat of them know what our ancestors didn't know. You need to wait, and then it is okay. And so this, my friends, is the biblical gem behind the migrating quails. Now I'd like to take you to our stop number 2 on our virtual journey. As we go to the Mediterranean coast, we go just a little south of Haifa, a little north of Caesarea, to a place called Hoff Door. What do you see in Hoff Door? A beautiful beach. Look at that Mediterranean. Look at the deep blue that you're seeing there, the golden sands. Perhaps you can hear children playing in the sand, building their sand castles, splashing in the waves. They're having a fantastic time. It's a perfect day for a swim. So let's go for a snorkel. As we go into the water, you may not see such incredible fish, but there is something else that we'll be looking for here. As you go into the water, believe it or not, we're going to be looking for snails. Because these snails that we're going to discover tell us an incredible story. These are the hidden gems. The story that the snail will tell us is the story of the return of the Jewish people to their homeland. And with their return to the homeland, it is a story of a rediscovery of something lost, an incredible tradition. So what might you ask is this incredible story of the snail? Allow me to read to you from the Tanakh, from the Torah. In Bamidbar again, it says to us like this, and God said to Moses, saying, speak to the people of Israel, and they should make tzitzit for themselves, tassels on the corners of their garments. And the thread that they should put on the tassels of the garment should be a blue thread. Now you may ask, what is the Torah really talking about here? What are we talking about, this blue thread? You see, until around 40 years ago, no one knew what this blue thread was. And if you look around, those who wear tzitzit on the talis that we wear in synagogue, the talit, the prayer shawl, most are white, most are not blue. And until around 40 years ago, no one wore the blue because no one knew the blue. But right here on Hoff Door, on this beautiful beach, it has been revived with the help of the snail. How so? It began like this. Around 100 years ago, there was a rabbi, Rabbi Herzog, and he was convinced that the snail that he discovered here on the beach, this snail, the Murex trunculus, was the key to the story of blue. But every time he tried to experiment with the snail, taking the gland out of the snail and trying to use it to make dye, he could only come up with the color purple. It never turned blue. And no matter how hard he tried, how many different experiments he did, he wasn't able to prove that the snail was the source of what we know as the biblical blue. Until one day in 1980, there was a professor in the Shenkar Institute of Fashion in Tel Aviv who was also trying to understand the concept of different textiles and the coloring and the dyes that are made. He's trying to work out how does this get from a purple, or can it get from a purple towards a blue? And as he's busy working, he decides, you know what, I'm going to go for a cup of coffee. Puts his beaker on the table. As he puts his beaker on the table that has the solution inside of it from the snail, it has wool inside of it, he goes out to make his coffee. He comes back. As he pulls out the wool, he's able to see that it is blue. What happened? He perplexed, tries to understand, and then he realizes He left the beaker in the sunlight. And the sunlight was the key that was able to create a chemical reaction that turned the purple to blue. And so, my friends, the biblical blue that was supposed to be part of our tradition was rediscovered. But one more fact that really boggles the mind is that as you think of an ordinary beach where people are frolicking in the beach, really what we are discovering is an ancient tradition. And this ancient tradition has a very special element to it. You see, the color, all colors have a special peak that they peak at on the color spectrum. It's measured in nanometers. And this particular blue, the tchelet as we call it in Hebrew, it peaks at a certain peak. What is that? I'll show you. It peaks at 613 nanometers. And the strange thing is this, 613, we know that number from somewhere else. Where do we know that number from? That is the number of all the mitzvot in the Torah. And when you look into the Torah, it will tell us the reason we need to wear the tzitzit is because when you wear the tzitzit, you remember looking at the blue of the tzitzit, you see the blue of the heavens. And when you think of the blue of the heavens, you think of God. And when you think of God, you also remember all the mitzvot that he has given us. And how many mitzvot has he given us? 613. And so the exact color that gives us what we need for the tzitzit is the same amount of, the same number of the mitzvot of the Torah. I think that's absolutely incredible. And if you think about our momentum trips, as we speak about the concept of HP moments, higher power moments, hashgacha pratit, is there anything else that could be more exciting than the rediscovery of a lost tradition at exactly the number that's supposed to remind us of all the mitzvot? And that, my friends, is discovered on a beach. Who comes here thinking that they are rediscovering an ancient tradition that was lost for centuries? All they want is a fun day out in the sun. And so I want to say to you like this, before we move to our next stop, think of this. The blue of the tchelet reminds us not only of the blue of the tzitzit and of the heavens, but the blue of the tchelet reminds us of something else. I'll give you a clue. Imagine a white background, two blue stripes, and in between those two stripes, the Star of David, Magen David. What are we talking about? Absolutely, you know it. It's the flag of Israel. And when the flag of the state of Israel was originally designed, it was designed to remind us of the color of tchelet and to remind us of the talus itself. And therefore, as we think about the story of the flag, we're thinking about God looking after us to a certain degree. And so that takes us to our last stop, our stop in Gush Etzion. As we go down from the coast, we travel southwards and then inland as we go towards Jerusalem, and then south of Jerusalem, down towards, a little further south towards Gush Etzion. As we get closer to Gush Etzion, we'll see that the landscape changes. The mountains become higher. In fact, we're traveling on the spine of mountains that cuts from the north of Israel all the way through down to the south. And as we travel on that, we also see that the landscape gets much more rugged. Now, the thing is this. When we usually speak of Gush Etzion is usually remembered in the political context. It was an important element of part of the story of the founding of the State of Israel in 1948. And in 1967, and what came after the Six-Day War becomes a very important point. But I don't want to focus on the political element. Rather, what I want to focus on is a little bit of the geographical or topographical element. You see, it goes like this. As we go through towards Gush Etzion and we leave Jerusalem, we start to see all sorts of vegetation. We start to see terraces as they were built in ancient times in order to make sure that the slope of the mountain doesn't go, that as the rain comes down, the soil that's on the top of the mountain doesn't get washed away, but is rather held in there. And these trees are planted in these terraces. The trees that you'll see are mainly olive trees. And this you will see until you get a little bit further to the south. As you go further to the south in Gush Etzion, you see these beautiful vineyards. And the land or the area of the Gush Etzion is in the tribal area of Judah. Judah was blessed with vine and with wine. And so the question is, who cares? Or what's important about a olive tree and a vine? Well, let me tell you like this. This seemingly insignificant piece tells us a very important story. It helps us uncover a hidden gem. And this hidden gem is another story in the Bible, which you know well. Think about it. A story with an olive branch, a vine, and I'll give you one more clue, a flood. You got it. It's the story of Noah. Now, I'm not saying in any way that Noah's Ark landed here in the area of Gush Etzion. Not at all. But what I am saying is the story that we know of Noah, we can understand better when we come to Gush Etzion and we understand the lay of the land. In Gush Etzion, the olive trees only grow up to 2,400 feet, around 800 meters above sea level. Above that, it's too cold. It's not conducive for olive trees, and so you don't find that many there. Beyond the 2,400 meters, higher in the mountains, you'll see vines, and that's what grows there. So here's the thing. When we get to the story of Noah and the ark, Noah's in the ark. He waits out the flood. He waits until the waters have receded. And only when he gets the sign to say to him, Noah, you can now leave the ark, does he leave the ark. What is the sign that he has to see? The sign is an olive branch that the dove brings him. That olive branch says to Noah, the waters have receded to such a degree that not only are the upper tops of the mountains uncovered, but we're going further and further down, lower and lower. The ground, the earth, is inviting you back to come and plant. And when Noah gets out the ark, he doesn't go down all the way to the bottom where the olive trees grow. Rather, on the top of the hill, he gives thanks to being able to get out of the ark and plants a vine there. And so I want to say to you like this, as I think of the crazy time period that we're living in, we too are a little bit like Noah. We've been told to hunker down in our arks, in our homes, protect ourselves from the tremendous floodwaters that are around us, and hold out until we see the sign that we can come out from. And the incredible story, I think, is this. What is the sign that eventually Noah is given by God? It's the story of the rainbow. And as he is told of the story of the rainbow, he knows that God will never destroy the world again. So I wanted to share with you a little personal story. Last Shabbat with our family, we were going out for a walk for the little bit that we were able to we were allowed to walk. And we got rained upon, drenched as we were walking in the 10 minutes that we were allowed to be outside. And as we ended, the rain ended too, the sun came out, and suddenly this incredible rainbow came across the sky. I said to myself, and then I said to the family, you know, perhaps God, in his strange way, is saying to us, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. The rainbow will shine yet again. And I'm telling you, it will be okay. Now, this isn't an easy time for any of us. And we have to thank those incredible people, all those medical workers and researchers who are doing so much in order to protect us. We need to be obedient, to listen, and to look after ourselves so that we don't go out in order to spread this. But one day, when we are able to, we will be able to go and know that, like our flag that you see behind me, like the Hatikva, our national anthem that says, our hope is not yet lost, Od lo avda tikvatenu, we will see a rainbow shining upon us again. And what a celebration is going to be when we see that. So what I want to say to you before we have some questions and answers is just that this Pesach that we're having is not a usual Pesach. It's certainly not the one that we've asked for. But maybe we can say this to ourselves. As we look at the flag of Israel, maybe even put a flag on our Seder table or on a chair next to us. And so when our children ask us, why are you doing this? We've already fulfilled one of the mitzvot of getting our children to ask questions. But number two, we're also saying to ourselves, as we look at the flag, we remember that God looks down upon us. And as he saved the children of Israel from Egypt and took them out of slavery, and as he gave us the state of Israel, he too will help our medical workers steer us in a direction to take us out of this so that we can celebrate in such a big way as the rainbow shines upon us in a beautiful way. Thank you so much. Time for questions with the grace of pleasure.
Oh, amen. Jonty, that was
Amen.
breathtaking. I wish you could see the profusion of comments, of thank yous, of comments that even the kids are like overwhelmed with gratitude. There's something in your ability to tell a story and to weave it all together. It's breathtaking. It's the only word I can think of. It's such an honor to be near you. So if I could ask you a couple of questions, that would be tremendous, okay? So the first one that
Absolutely.
came, okay, thanks. I love this question. You mentioned that with the birds, you have to wait to eat them or you'd get sick. And with color, that you had to wait for it to oxidize in the sun. Both of those things have elements of time and patience. Do you think there's a deeper message for us in that?
Wow, what an amazing question.
Mhm.
Yes, there is absolutely a deeper message. I think that, not saying that I know it all, but certainly I think we have been hurtling towards the future. We have been creating, and the speed with which we live in these days is unparalleled. And maybe one of the messages we have to think is, how do we slow ourselves down? Perhaps that's part of what Shabbat is about. Perhaps that's what part of being at home now, which is not always easy, but just slow down. Think, and maybe appreciate. And then together, maybe we'll be able to find the answers of how do we work with this all.
Wow. Okay, another question, Jonty. You know, you were making connections between biblical narrative and the scientific narrative, which is interesting. So somebody was curious, how did the Bible itself, how did the Torah itself explain why the people got sick from eating those birds? Did it explain?
Great question. And certainly the way that I learned it as a kid was that these people, you know, they were impatient. They were angry with God. They were selfish. I mean, what more could you ask? God took you out of Egypt. He gave you freedom after slavery. He also then, brought you to Mount Sinai. He gave you the manna. Anything you wanted, it would taste like, it would taste. What, you're complaining about all of that? So I'd always thought about it as this tremendous complaint, and that is why they got sick, as a message. Don't be so demanding.
Right.
And yet, when I learned the story in the way it is, that scientifically there's an explanation, it's not that biblically there's not an explanation, but part of miracles is about timing. And how often we've also found that in our lives, it's not the event that happens that's so incredible, but it happens just at the right moment. That is the making of a miracle.
Oh, that is like spectacular. You know, I feel like this was an utter privilege and an honor. Okay, can I have one more question? Do we have time for one more question?
For sure, for you, anything.
Oh, Jonty, honestly, you really are. You really are something. Okay, I'm just gonna scroll through and decide what we're gonna do. Okay, so the next question was, the people that come up with these dynamics, the ones who discovered that the tchelet color is developed by oxidization, are they actually looking for ways to tie it into biblical things, or are they just regular secular scientists who are shocked by the discoveries that they make?
So I think the answer is both. There are those who are doing their work as scientific work, and they're not looking for any kind of biblical connection. And there are those who are not doing it from a scientific perspective. They're looking for a biblical connection. And when they do meet, when the things come together, that's the incredible element. And sometimes I think maybe that's also a lesson to us. It's not always what we're looking for is what we get. But sometimes when we search, when we look, it's the surprises that come to us that make it so much more meaningful.
Oh my, that is absolutely a message for us to carry forward. Also incredibly deep. Somebody said it's the sun that creates the color. And I think that's true. You know, somebody also mentioned that rainbows are being painted by children all the way around the world, and people are putting them in their windows. I like the idea of a rainbow and the flag for Pesach at our seders. And actually, while we're on the topic of Pesach, Jonty, I wanted to share that we created a quarantine Passover Haggadah companion. so useful, something that all of us
Amazing.
can use leading up to it, and it'll help make our experience of the Seder, whether we're doing it by ourselves, alone, or as a small group, or virtually, whatever it is. And we've included the link here. You'll find it in the chat function. That is the Momentum Haggadah Companion link. And that's just like, wow. Okay, so
Wow, that's a great idea.
I think so too. And thank you, Dr.
Absolutely.